And so the state of Israel is supposed to be a Kiddush Hashem, which means sanctifying God's name, the opposite of Chilul Hashem. The purpose of Israel is to sanctify God's name, to be a light unto the nations, and a holy nation, and a nation of priests. And Israel was deliberately put in a situation where you have a tiny Jewish state of 5.5 million Jews surrounded by 500 million Muslims in 22 Arab Muslim Nazi countries that surround little Israel. The Arab Muslim Nazis have over 100 times Israel's population. The Arab Muslim Nazis have over 600 times the land that tiny little Israel has. And tiny little Israel has to defend herself against all of these odds when the whole world supports the Arab Muslim Nazis because they have the oil and they have the money and they have the power and they have the numbers. And so everybody wants to appease the Arab Muslim Nazis. Nobody cares about appeasing little Israel. Nobody's afraid nobody's afraid of God. They're all afraid of Arab oil money and of Arab terrorism and Arab violence and Arab threats. And so the whole world is against Israel, and the whole world supports the Muslims. And by the way, I mentioned there are 500 million Arab Muslim Nazis and Iranian Muslim Nazis surrounding little Israel. Altogether, in the whole world, not just in the Middle East, but in the whole world, you have 67 Muslim countries with 1.5 billion people against tiny little Israel. So Israel is facing impossible, unbelievable odds, and Israel still survives and wins. It is the most incredible of miracles. And the purpose of creating that scenario is to show the world, you see, God is the ruler. Through Israel, God proves to the world that there is a God. To anyone who has eyes to see, to anyone who has even the slightest ability to see reality. The existence of little Israel and the miraculous victories in 6-day wars of little Israel are there to prove to the world, through God's people, through Israel, that there is a God. That's what a light unto the nations means. The Jews become a light unto the nations because through the Jews, through this tiny little outnumbered people, hopelessly outnumbered people, God proves His existence. God proves to all the nations of the world and to all peoples of the world that He is the ruler of the world. That's the purpose of Israel. And so Israel's government and Israel's leaders should fearlessly do what they have to do to defend their people. And sinking this flotilla and standing up against Jew haters like this is an example of fearlessly standing up for the truth with faith in God. And if Israel would do that, God would protect Israel. It doesn't matter what the New York Nazi Times says. It doesn't matter what ABC, CBS, NBC, BBC, and CNN and even Fox. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what they say. What matters is doing what God commands us to do. God will protect Israel. God will find a way to give Israel victory if Israel does what He says. If Israel doesn't do it, God forbid, I don't care who your allies are. I don't care what great public relations you have. Everything you do will fail and be disastrous if you go against God. If you do what God tells you to do, you will win. That's the lesson of Jewish history. It's the lesson of all history. And it's the purpose for the existence of the state of Israel. And so if we ever took power, if I were ever the Prime Minister of Israel, there wouldn't be any flotillas coming in and threatening to bring supplies to Muslim terrorists that murder Jews. First of all, the Muslim terrorists who murder Jews would be killed. Flotillas that try to come in, they wouldn't do it because they would know that they'd be killed. But if anyone were crazy enough to try to do it, we would sink the flotilla and kill everybody on those ships. And they would learn that they can condemn all they want, but you don't mess with God's people. And that would make us a light unto the nations, and a holy nation, and a nation of priests. That would enable us to set an example for righteous people and good people in every nation. Every nation would be able to look to Israel as an example for the proper behavior and the proper ethics and the proper faith. And good people in every country would be able to look at Israel as an example. And we would truly be Or La'amim, a light unto the nations. And if we did that, believe me, no one would be able to lay a finger on Israel. If we did that, if we took that stand, if we really had a government that believes and a people that believes and returns to God, I don't care how small Israel is, and I don't care how big her enemies are, we would win. God would create the circumstances for us to win. I don't know exactly how he would do it, but he would do it. He's promised us he would do it, and he would do it. And we saw in 1967 in the Six-Day War how he did it when Israel defied the United States, the Soviets, the UN, the whole world, and struck a preemptive strike. In 6 days, Israel quadrupled in size, defeated all of her enemies, beat the whole Arab Muslim world. Nobody could believe it. That's what happens when you do what God tells you to do. When you do what the nations of the world tell you to do, then the mighty Israeli Air Force with all the advanced technology can't even beat a ragtag terrorist gang like Hamas in Gaza or Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israelis are unable to handle those problems when they don't do what God tells them to do. The smallest of problems you can't solve if you don't do what God tells you to do. But the biggest of problems, and all problems can be solved and overcome when you do what God tells you to do. That is the lesson of Israel's history. And it's a lesson for the Jew and it's a lesson for the Gentile. And it's a lesson that we would teach the world.